I was the one who paid off their mortgage, the one who stayed quiet when they called me a disappointment, and in the end they left me out of the will. But what they didn't know, I already found what they were hiding, and I wasn't going to leave it behind. I was wearing the same black dress I'd worn to 3 other funerals. It was my father's wake. There was an open bar, full buffet. My siblings invited their friends, their in-laws, their co-workers. It looked more like a wedding than a goodbye. I stood by the wall holding a glass of water. No one offered me a chair. When my mother saw me, she raised her glass. She said, "To my beautiful children, the ones who stayed, the ones who never left me." Everyone clapped. I didn't, because I knew who that was aimed at. I had been living out of state for 7 years. I had a job, a small apartment, nothing special. But I called every week. I visited on holidays. I sent money every time they needed it. My brother needed help with a down payment. I wired him $11,000. My sister was behind on student loans. I covered 3 months. When Dad was sick, I flew home without hesitation. I took unpaid leave. I bathed him, fed him, slept on the couch for 5 weeks. And now, here I was, drinking warm water in a room full of people who pretended I didn't exist. My name is Rachel. I'm the middle child, not the golden oldest, not the baby, just the one who learned to keep her mouth shut. Because when I was younger, I used to speak up. I used to say things like, "Why does Emma get new clothes every semester and I get hand-me-downs?" Or, "Why did Daniel get a car at 17, but I had to work 2 jobs just to afford a bicycle?" The answers were always the same. Don't start drama. Be grateful. Stop comparing. So eventually, I did stop. I stopped asking, stopped expecting, stopped needing. But I never stopped giving, even when it hurt, even when Mom forgot my birthday, 2 years in a row. Even when I had to cancel my vacation to help her move houses, because Emma was too busy and Daniel had the kids. Even when they made jokes like, "Oh, Rachel, you're too independent for your own good." Too independent? That's what they called it when they forgot me. Dad used to joke that I was born with a suitcase in my hand, that I was the type to leave and never look back. He wasn't entirely wrong. I did leave, but I always looked back, until now. At the wake, they handed out printed programs, full color, glossy. On the back was a list of family members, names, bios, photos. I wasn't on it. There was a group photo of all of us from Christmas 5 years ago. They had cropped me out. I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked outside. I sat on the curb. I texted my boss, "I won't be coming in next week." Then I booked a room at a cheap motel and stayed up all night scrolling through old emails. Because something didn't sit right. A week later, the will was read. Daniel cried. Emma held Mom's hand. When the lawyer said the words, "And to my daughter Rachel, I leave," there was a pause, then he cleared his throat. "Nothing, at her request." At my request? I looked up, confused. The lawyer nodded at me. "As per the letter you submitted last spring." I blinked. I never submitted a letter. He looked uncomfortable. It was typed, signed, said you didn't want to be included. I said nothing. Emma leaned forward, pretending to be shocked. "Oh my God, Rachel, why would you do that?" Daniel looked away. Mom stayed silent. I stood up. I said, "I never wrote that letter." Then I walked out. No yelling, no demands, no questions, just silence. That's what they wanted, right? They wanted me gone. So I gave them what they wanted. I drove back to the motel, laid down, and smiled. Because now, I had nothing left to lose, and nothing left to protect. And that's when I remembered something. 10 years ago, when Dad had surgery, I stayed in the guest room. One night, I had trouble sleeping. I got up to grab water and saw Dad in the study with a shoebox full of documents. When he saw me, he panicked, shoved them away. I asked what it was. He said, "Family stuff, none of your business." I forgot about it until now. The next morning, I drove to the house. No one was home. I still had a key. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. I went to the study, looked under the cabinet, pulled back the carpet, and there it was, the same shoebox, same label. Do not touch. I opened it. There were folders, letters, photos, bank statements, and one envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting. It started, "If you're reading this, then you were never supposed to be left out." That's when everything changed, but that's for another time. The envelope was creased at the edges, faded. It smelled like dust and cigarettes. Inside was my father's handwriting, the same neat cursive he used to label everything in the garage. It said, "Rachel, I don't know when you'll find this, but if you do, then something went wrong." I kept reading. "I left you out of the first will. You told me to. You said you didn't want anything, but then you came back, and I realized you were the only one who showed up when it mattered. I changed the documents. I included you. I made sure I hope your mother honors that." She didn't, because what I found next was a second will, signed, notarized. It was dated 6 months before his death, and in it, he left me everything: the house, the land, the old truck. Even his coin collection that he told everyone was worthless. In this version, Emma got a small trust. Daniel got the lake cabin, but I was the executor. I was the beneficiary. He even wrote she never asked for anything and still gave more than anyone. I sat on the floor for over an hour, reading, rereading. Then I took out my phone. I called the lawyer. He picked up. I asked one question. "Did you ever see a second will?" He paused, then said, "No. We only received the one signed last year, the one with the letter I said, 'This one is newer.'" He sounded surprised, told me to bring it in. I did. He looked nervous. He read every page twice, then a third time. "This is real," he said. "This one overrides the first." Then he looked at me. "Rachel, do you know what this means?" I nodded. It meant someone had lied. It meant someone had hidden this. It meant they knew, and they buried it. But they weren't very smart, because they forgot. I remember everything. I remember Emma coming home from college, bragging about how she helped Dad clean out the study when he was in the hospital. I remember Mom saying, "He has too many papers. He needs to learn to let go." I remember Daniel telling me one Thanksgiving, "Dad's not as sharp as he used to be. Sometimes we have to make decisions for him." I used to brush it off, tell myself they meant well, but now I could see it clearly. They never thought I'd come back. They never thought I'd find it. They thought I'd stay quiet, and I almost did. But then the lawyer said, "We'll have to file a formal contest. If the court agrees this is the valid will, everything changes." So I said, "Do it." Then I went home, back to my apartment, back to the silence. I didn't tell them. I wanted it to hit them all at once. A month later, I got a call from Emma. Her voice was sharp, controlled. She said, "Why is Mom getting court papers?" I said, "Check the envelope." She called back 30 minutes later, screaming, "You're disgusting. You're trying to steal everything. Dad wanted us to have it. You're lying." I didn't say a word. She said, "You don't even need that house. You don't even live here." Still silent. Then she said, "You're not even part of this family." And I said, "I know." Then I hung up. Daniel called 2 days later. His voice was calmer, more careful. He said, "Can we work something out?" I said, "Talk to the lawyer." He said, "Rachel, don't do this. Be the bigger person." I said, "I was. For 30 years. Then I blocked his number. Court took 3 months. I submitted the documents, the original copies, the notarization. They didn't have a case, because their version of the will was typed. No witnesses, no dates, only a letter that looked like it came from me. But it didn't. And handwriting experts confirmed it. The judge ruled in my favor. I didn't cry, didn't celebrate. I just signed the papers. And on a cold Tuesday morning, I became the legal owner of the house. Mom had 60 days to vacate. She refused, said, "I was married to that man for 40 years. This is my home." I said, "It was Dad's, and now it's mine." She called me heartless, said I was ungrateful, said I was punishing her for being a mother. I said nothing. She stayed until the very last hour. Then she left. Didn't even say goodbye. Emma posted on Facebook, "Some people don't know what loyalty means." Daniel posted a Bible verse. I didn't post anything. I just changed the locks. And then I opened the garage. Inside, there were shelves of old boxes. I pulled out the rest of the paperwork Dad had stored. Turns out, the coin collection wasn't worthless. It was valued at over $200,000. There were appraisals, banknotes, even a buyer list. My father had spent 15 years collecting rare pieces, silver dollars, gold commemoratives, some from the 1800s. I never knew. Because he never told me. Because he never thought he had to. He just assumed that someday I'd find it. And I did. But that wasn't the only thing hidden in that house. There was something else, something even they didn't know about. And it changed everything. It was taped to the back of a drawer. I almost missed it. The drawer stuck when I pulled it out, swollen from years of moisture. When I yanked it hard enough, it came loose, and behind it, folded flat, was a thin envelope. No name, just a date. March 4th, 23 years ago. I opened it. Inside were photographs, old, blurred, but clear enough. A man, a woman, a house I didn't recognize. And on the back of one photo was a name. Grace. The handwriting wasn't Dad's, it was Mom's. I stared at it for a long time. Grace. I didn't know a Grace, not in our family, not in the neighborhood. So I called the lawyer again. I asked, when Dad bought this house, was there a previous owner named Grace? He checked, then paused. No, he said. But there was a cosigner on a second mortgage from years ago. A woman named Grace Wilkins. I didn't respond, just hung up. That night, I pulled out the old family photo albums, looked through every single page. There she was, in the background, at my 6th birthday, standing behind the fence, watching, and again. Christmas morning, 1999. She's on the porch, wearing red, holding a mug. I showed the pictures to a neighbor the next day, Mrs. Callahan. She'd lived next door since the 80s. She looked at the photos, and her face changed. Oh dear, she said, you don't know, do you? I didn't answer. She said, Grace was your father's first wife. They divorced long before he married your mother. I stared at her. She continued, your mom never liked her, said she was a mistake. But your dad, he never really let go. I asked one question. Did they have kids? She hesitated, then nodded. One, a boy, but he didn't live long. She didn't say more, didn't need to. I went home and searched the attic. Dad kept everything. I found the birth certificate first, then the hospital papers, then the obituary, name, Noah Wilkins, born April 2nd, died July 29th, age 4. My father had a son before me. He never told me. No one did. There were drawings, tiny shoes, a stuffed bear with one eye missing. He kept it all. And in the bottom of the box was a note written in shaking handwriting. To my son, I think of you every day. I hope you would have liked your little sister. It was dated a week before I was born. I sat there in the attic, surrounded by dust, heat, and ghosts, and I realized something. I was never invisible to my father. Not really. I was his second chance. But my mother, she hated reminders. She hated being second. And maybe that's why she never forgave me. Because I looked like someone he loved before her. Because I reminded her of a life that didn't include her. And now, she didn't just bury the will. She buried everything. The photos, the story, even the memory of a boy I never got to meet. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stood up, wiped the dust off my hands, and brought the box down to the living room. Then I wrote a letter. To my mother. I didn't threaten her, didn't blame her, didn't ask for an apology. I just wrote, I found everything. I know about Grace, I know about Noah, and I know what you did to keep it hidden. I don't want anything from you, but I thought you should know. I'm not angry. I'm not even hurt anymore. I just understand. I mailed it. No return address. She didn't respond. But she didn't have to, because 2 weeks later, Emma sent me a text. It just said, Mom's in the hospital. She asked for you. I told her not to bother. I didn't reply. Then Daniel called. He left a voicemail. You made your point. Can you let it go now? She's old. She's sick. She won't be around much longer. I saved the message. Didn't return the call. That week, I went to Dad's grave. I hadn't been since the funeral. I brought the old stuffed bear with me, the one from the attic. I laid it on the headstone and whispered, "I found him, Dad. I found everything." Then I walked away. I didn't cry, I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt light, like I wasn't carrying someone else's weight anymore. Like I wasn't the family's ghost. I was something else now, something they couldn't define, couldn't control, couldn't erase. And that's when I decided I wouldn't sell the house, I'd restore it, every crack, every floorboard, every piece of hidden history. Not for them, for me, for Noah, for the father who left behind more than I ever knew, and maybe to remind the rest of them that just because someone leaves quietly doesn't mean they disappear. The renovations took 14 months. I didn't tell anyone, no updates, no social media posts, no phone calls, just silence. I hired contractors from out of town, paid in cash, changed the locks. Every trace of my parents' design, the floral wallpaper, the cheap linoleum floors, the cracked glass cabinets, gone. In their place, clean hardwood, smooth stone, quiet, soft lighting. I kept one thing. The old rocking chair in the attic, the one beside Noah's box. I placed it by the front window. It creaks when it moves. I like that. By the time I finished, the house looked nothing like the one I grew up in. And yet, it felt more like home than it ever did. I turned it into a writing retreat. Something small, private, beautiful. Writers come from all over now. They stay for a weekend or a month. They write books, plays, scripts, sometimes just journal entries. They call it peaceful. They don't know the ghosts buried beneath the floorboards. They don't need to. The first guest left a note in the drawer. "I haven't slept this well in years." I smiled when I read that. Sometimes healing doesn't look like fire. Sometimes it looks like quiet, like stillness, like forgiveness, even when no one says sorry. About 6 months after the retreat opened, I got an email. The subject line just said, "Request." It was from Emma. She wanted to book a weekend, said she was working on something. I didn't reply. She tried again. This time she used a fake name. Didn't matter. I recognized her writing. I blocked the account. Then Daniel reached out. He showed up, in person. I watched him through the camera. He stood at the gate for almost 20 minutes. I didn't open it. He left a note. "I didn't know about the will. Mom made us sign papers, said it was routine. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't know." He folded it carefully, left it on the stone. I left it there. Rain turned the ink into a blur. It looked better that way. A month later, I got a letter from a lawyer. My mother had passed. She left a request to be buried beside my father. I declined. The cemetery director said it wasn't up to me, but I still sent the documents I found. The ones with Grace's name, with Noah's, the death records, the photographs. They reviewed them. And her request was denied. She was buried in a separate plot, unmarked. I didn't go. I didn't cry. But that night, I sat on the porch, rocking in the old chair, holding the stuffed bear. I didn't need vengeance. I didn't need them to grovel or beg. What I needed was space, and that's what I took. They left me out of the will. So I took the truth, the house, the legacy they buried, and I built something better, something honest, something whole. Now sometimes writers ask me if I grew up here. I tell them, not really. But I came back. They nod. They don't push. Everyone's running from something. Everyone's trying to find silence. And in this house, they do. The last time Emma tried to reach me, she left a voicemail. Her voice cracked halfway through. She said, "Mom said you'd never make it without us, that you'd disappear, but you didn't. You became something else. I don't know how you did it, but I see it now." I deleted the message, not out of anger, out of peace, because some things don't need to be held onto, and some people don't get to stay in your story forever. I was the outcast, the forgotten one, the daughter who was told she didn't belong. And now they Google my name. They whisper when they drive past the retreat. They say things like, "I knew her when she was just the quiet one." But they didn't know me, not really, because all they saw was the silence. They never saw the strength beneath it. They never saw what I was building while they were laughing. They never noticed I had already left. Not physically, emotionally. The day they read that will, the day they chose to erase me, they didn't realize I was already gone. And what I left behind wasn't bitterness. It was a legacy they could never touch.